Alright, so I'm going to give the boots a little bit of a texture, at least try it. I don't want to go overboard with the texture, but just something. So, you know, I have sponges, and I also glued pieces of sponges to sticks in the past. So I could probably try to get in between areas. So the idea is I have this tank brown color, and I'm going to try to just take this, go on a piece of paper, napkin, whatever you got. Just sort of give it a little bit of a texture. Now if you go overboard with it, you could wipe it off, but I could always try and take it down a little bit as well. And with the airbrush, because I still got my paint in my airbrush, so I don't want to let it sit there forever. But it was because of a red I mixed up. So I'm just going to have some fun with this. Now if I want to, I could probably go back in with this a little bit more with just some bright red. But we want to just give it... just have some fun with it. So I'm going to do this for a bit, and then we'll come back and see if we either need to dull it down or hit it with some red through the sponge. Okay, maybe hard to see in the camera, but it's like texture now. It's kind of like a red leather texture. It's not bright red. It looks a little bit more like boots, I guess you could say. You know, like leather boots coming up to about the thigh areas. So what I'm going to do next is I'll probably do a little bit of wash work within the line areas. Darken some of those up. Now I don't mind some of these areas a little bit darker than other areas. That's kind of fine. That kind of works for it. What I'll probably have to do here is just maybe... hit a little bit there, but what I could do is hit it with some shadow areas too if I want to, just to bring out some areas. I probably will. We can do that right now actually. So it's good to have a couple airbrushes so you can swap out the colors. Hold on, this one. So what you could probably do is just kind of darken up where bottom of the foot would be hitting the ground, getting dirty all the time. A little bit there. Okay, so that kind of works a little bit better. Kind of looks like more of a boot that's kind of worn out at the bottom. So what I'll probably do now, like I said, is we'll go into the garage. I'll kind of gloss it up after I do my wash work. And then dull it back down a little bit. Not much, just a little. I want to keep it nice and shiny leather, like they're kind of worn, but you know, they're at least sturdy for being boots. Alright, so we got the boots done. I dulled them down, so now they kind of look like the shiny, little bit worn leather. We're going to let that sit for a bit, then tomorrow I'll come back and maybe I might have to do some other stuff here and there, we'll see. Going to do the shoelaces and then we'll start working on the hair. I don't want to do the eyes yet because sometimes silly putty might pull off the eye decals. I'm just, if you use fresh silly putty, you might get away with it. But what I like to do is, she's got a clear coat over the eyes now after I did the white. And then what I'll do is I'll put the eye decals on, and then I let those sit, and I do another clear coat over that. But sometimes I've had in the past where silly putty will rip it off. Even fresh silly putty, like right out of the box that I haven't used yet, sometimes might pull off. So I like to do that at the end just to be on the safe side. Then after that, it's pretty much just the base and we're ready to go. So now that I'm done with her, I'm going to put her in the shelf on this block of wood that I have her now. And now I can actually start working on the base. So I could probably go into the garage and start putting that stuff on it and start getting that set up and cleaned up, and we can get the base looking good while this is setting up. And, we could do two things at once, which is pretty good. Okay, so let's start working on the base. What I did is I wrapped it around with saran wrap and I put tape around it. Only because I know I'm going to have to sand up here because I got to still prime this bottom anyway. But I don't want to have to sand all this roughness down when I get that stuff on there. I want to try to keep it as smooth as possible. But what I did do is I put some silly putty in here. And the idea is we're going to take the primer, spray it down, and then what we do is we have the snow stuff, and it's got these little holes they give you in this little kit. You can sprinkle it on. So what I'll do is I'll sprinkle it on over this piece of cardboard just in case I want to salvage some of it, because this stuff is, you could kind of sprinkle on something on paper, and then you can take the paper and put it back into the container. You can salvage it. And then also make sure you have a mask too when you do this stuff, because primer gets very stinky and stuff. So since I'm going to be spraying and doing it here, I don't want to be breathing this in too much. But I do have my airbrush, my primer booth right here set up with the vacuum cleaner to suck in all the fumes. So what I'll do is I'm going to spray it at an angle, getting it kind of wet, going over into the little hole back here where it sucks in all the dust and everything. So it should work out pretty good. Okay, so I don't want to sit in the garage too long with this, but it's really working out pretty good. It's created a texture on my sculpt now, so it looks a little bit grainy. You get kind of like a cloud feel. Some areas are a little bit too grainy still, so I got to use the filler primer on those. And the reason why I'm using filler primer and going thick on it is it's going to actually hold this stuff in there better. It's going to really bond it together, and it's going to create like a sculpt. You can use primer is like almost, it's like kind of think of it as like a glue. I'm like gluing this stuff down and it's spraying all over. And a couple more coats is really going to bond it together, and it's really going to keep it there, and it's not going to flake off or anything like that. There is a couple areas though I feel that I need to get in a little bit more with the primer filler. Probably up around here it's a little too grainy. Around here with it bleeding down, it's creating a nice texture, so I like it there. But once it really dries, it's going to sink in and work out a little bit better that way. I'm only a little concerned though up in here still, because this stuff might be a little too grainy where it actually hits the sculpt going in the boot. So what I might have to do is, once this is all done, do a little sand work in there. That might be a little bit smooth, but that's fine. So I'm going to let this dry for about a good 20 minutes, and then before I clean up for the night, I'll come back and hit it again and let it sit overnight. And this way it'll start really going and kind of getting a nice texture and drying up. And this way I don't have to sit there and like sculpt all that little texturing stuff. You just, by throwing some stuff on there and letting the primer bond it all, you get a nice texture. So that's what we'll do, and hopefully by tomorrow we'll do another coat and see how it works out. Alright, so we're going to start working on the hair. Right now I got her all masked off, and we're going to start just slapping some color on there and getting this all done. So these are the colors I have here. I have this golden Hansa yellow light. They don't make these airbrush colors anymore, so I only have a little bit of this left. I wish they would go back and make these. They don't have that, only have the high flow now, but I still have this bottle left. So you can't keep the paint forever, so you got to use it. So I'm pretty much using up a lot of these old goldens I got. Right here is a soft body Liquitex soft white. It's a beige, soft white beige type color. And then right here is a Liquitex raw sienna. Now these two bottles here, they're thick paints. They're not the tube thickness, but they're not airbrush ready, so they're kind of like an in-between. They're good if you want to use it like a paintbrush and do some nice strokes with it. So it works out pretty cool. But these two bottles here I have mixed with Liquitex airbrush medium. So you kind of put a couple of this, I think it's like a certain percentage of this and then a certain percentage of the airbrush medium. You shake it up and you get like an airbrush paint. And then over here I have a golden burnt sienna. This is really thick stuff, so you have to kind of thin it down in a bottle. I won't know if I'm going to use the burnt sienna. It's only if I really want to go with like a dirty blonde. I really want to keep the raw sienna here as like the darkest color on here, but we'll see. I got to kind of just keep blending it. So the idea is we're going to do a flat color of yellow on top of the skin tone flesh that I kind of left up there, because it's always good to kind of get like the flesh on the hair and then you get a color on top of it. And then we'll start doing some brush strokes, and then we'll do some airbrush work, and then brush strokes and airbrush work, and I keep going back and forth till I get the hair where I want it. So I definitely want to keep it bright yellow, only because the comic book has a bright yellow, but I still want to add some life to it. I just don't want to just do bright yellow and a little bit of shading and then done. I want to kind of break it up as much as I can. So we'll see as far as we could go with it. Alright, I think we're pretty good with the hair. I like where it's at right now. It might be hard to see in the camera, but it's not overly yellow. It's got some whites highlights in there. It's got some darker areas. Like, what I try to do is a little bit darker underneath here, then we come up here, it's a little bit whiter, then we come back over here, it's a little bit darker. So we got sort of like a curved look going to it, as well as the sculpt and also the paint. Over on the back of the hair and stuff, so I try to get a lot of shadows underneath the hair, especially under here, because once you get the cape under, you're not really going to look too much under there, but we're definitely going to look down. I also tried to do some shadows within here and around the headband piece up there, so that'll work out pretty good. Now in the back, when I was doing my paintbrushing, I was doing it very rough. I was just kind of like throwing some heavy strokes of paintbrush. I was trying to get into some areas here and there. I think I might have to do a couple more areas off the camera, but I'm going to like hit it with some Tetris dull coat first and dull it down just to kind of get it all looking pretty good. But that's kind of where I wanted it. I didn't really want it too overly blonde, and I didn't want it to go too platinum blonde. I wanted to find that middle grade. But she is very yellow hair in the comic, so we got to kind of follow it. But I think it's got a nice flow to it now, and I think it works with the sculpt. So I'll dull it down. I'll make sure if there's any little spots I need to hit, I will. And I think what we'll do is we'll do the headband last, and as well as the shoelaces, and then I think we're pretty much done with the figure. Okay, so what I did is off camera I masked this off, but before I did that I did a black line going around the area, and now we got the black gloss up there. So I was looking on the pictures, and it seems that I thought it was red at first, but what it was is I was looking at it, one of the drawings, and it might have been a color issue with one of the print pages, so it looked red, or a dark red. Then I saw another drawing where it was black, but it had like blue highlights. And then on all the cosplay girls, it seems that they have black headbands. So I also saw a toy action figure where it was black, so I guess it is black. So I must have been off on that one. But so what I'm going to do is I got a little bit of a blue, and I'm going to kind of maybe over here and a little bit over here, just hit it with like a little bit of a blue there, just to give it something a little bit different, make it look, you know, like it's got some kind of a shine or something. Maybe I went a little bit too much, so what I could do is tone it down a bit. Let's get some of this this blue paint out of there. Just grab some of this black. Maybe it's too much. But yeah, something like this is I didn't realize, so I had to kind of look into it a little bit more. So we can kind of tone, yeah, there we go. So it's got a little bit of a blue kick to it, but nothing really crazy, but it still kind of looks black. So I think that'll be good for the headband, just to make that little piece pop out just a little bit. So it's just one of those things I didn't really think of. I also did the shoelaces in red to make them pop out a little bit more. I just kind of went off camera and just went with those. So we're pretty much done with the figure except the eyes. So we're going to let this paint pretty much cure up for the night. And then what we'll do is we'll put on the eyes, and hopefully I could start finishing up this base. Okay, so this took about 3 days or so before I got back to this piece, and I let it cure up pretty well in the garage. So I did a lot of wet sanding and dry sanding on it. When I was doing my dry sanding first, I realized a lot of the sprinkle stuff that was at the edge up here, a lot of the primer came down and soaked down to it, and it made it really thick and really bumpy. So what I had to do is I had the dentist tools that I have that I kind of did some scraping, so I scraped a lot of it out and I sanded it down, and then I went into the bathroom underneath the faucet and I did some wet sanding on it just to kind of tone it down, because a lot of the sprinkle stuff up around here was sticking out too much and it looked too like sandy looking. So what I did is I just went and did some wet sanding all around the item, and I just toned it down a little bit, so now we have a nice texture on the clouds. So it worked out exactly as I hoped. The only thing I have to do now is I'm going to pull out the silly putty here and do some sanding in here and make sure this is all smooth, so this way when I put the feet in, it doesn't actually scrape anything up on there. So that's the only thing I got to be careful of. So other than that, we're looking pretty good. So I'm going to just finish this up, and then what we're going to do is it's going to be a simple black base, and then we're going to do clouds with some blue tints into it, and then it'll be done. And then at the end, what I'll do is hopefully I can get some more of my foam pads, and I could put like a nice foam pad circle around here, so this will be nice and secured. Also, there was a lot of bubbles under here, so I got to do one more patching up here with some putty work and just smooth this down. But my whole idea is I'm going to have a foam pad going around the edge to about here in a circle, so it's just like a nice foam pad going around here. So this will get covered anyway, so I really don't even have to worry about it. But that's pretty much my plan on the base. So this way, at least when it's on a shelf, it's not sticking on anything, and you can move it around and be nice and smooth. Alright, so we're going to do the clouds. It's pretty simple. Everything's all set up, ready to go. So I'm just going to do the base color in Wicked White. and just have some of this light blue mixture that I have from other paints in the past. So I'll just do some little bit of light blue shading there, here and there, and then I'll dull it back down. I want to keep it as white as possible. I don't want to throw any grays in there because I don't want to compete with the shirt, because the shirt has like a grayish blue. I want to keep this just like, you know, white, hints of blue, and let the shadows of the clouds do the work on the item. Okay, so now that the base is all done, we're going to set up the bottom of it. What I like to do is put some of this foam sticker stuff at the bottom. So what I do is I cut out like a little circle. Don't have any kind of like specific tools to make like perfect circles like they do in factories overseas. But what I like to do is kind of just simple stuff like this. I like to give it a little bit of a round piece. And what you can do is go like that. So this way it doesn't scrape up the bottom of your shelf. So now you have a nice little piece that goes under there. And then I have my friend in Canada, met a John, who does a lot of stuff for me. He makes me logo stickers. And so I set the bottom of the base like that. So what I do is I sign it, and then at least this way when you put it on your shelf, it doesn't scratch up and everything. So this foam stuff is really great. I had a friend pick these up for me at like Hobby Lobby type stuff. They're hard to find around here, so when he's over in other states and stuff, he snagged a couple for me. So that worked out pretty cool. So I just like to set stuff up like that. So I'll just gonna clean it up, look it over, see if I need to do anything else to it. We're gonna get the eyes set up, and then that's pretty much it. Okay guys, so we're going to work on her eyes now. I'm not going to be able to film all this only because it's really tricky, but we'll kind of go over a little bit here. I've done some videos in this in the past, but just we'll go through it again. I'm not really good at painting eyes. I like to use the eye decals from Archer-Fine Transfer Decals. So we got all these eyes here, and I find it's just easier if you cut them correctly. You could just slide them onto the statue and then seal them, and your eyes are done, and they look really good. 1/4 scale or lower, I have trouble with the eyes, but like a LSB, like legendary scale bust or life size bust, or maybe a bust that's kind of like this big, you know, make it like 8 inches or something, I could paint the eyes from scratch and it'll work. But smaller stuff, sometimes I just can't get them right. Plus with these, you could kind of slide them and get them where you need to get them, and then seal it, and you're good to go. So one thing that I've I've done some videos in this in the past, and things progress. So I paint the eyes now; they're in there. But when you use like white paint, they're very chalky. Sometimes certain brands are very chalky and gritty. So if you paint them on there and you try to slide a decal onto them, and they're not like a smooth surface, what will happen is if you try to pull the decal over to this section because it went too far, you might tear it because it grabs. So what I like to do is, the other night I put clear X22 Tamiya paint on the eyes, and what that does is it glosses it up and it gives it a nice smooth surface, because this stuff will do is it kind of like sort of seeps into everything and it makes it nice and smooth. So it's really easier to use this stuff, because the other thing too is if you use water with the decal and you have chalkiness paints in there, it might start breaking up that chalkiness on you, and it gets very muddy and messy, and you might even pull up the paint. This kind of almost like seals it pretty well, so I like this stuff. So she's got like I guess blue eyes. I've seen some drawings where they're really light blue, some are kind of more like a really potent blue, and some I've even seen got hints of green. So I think with this one I might go with this sort of a light blue one on this sheet. We have some here that are really, really light blue. Then over here we have the superhero eyes where they're really like dark blue here. So I think with this one though, we want to go with more of the light blue but still have some kind of a blue in there. This one right here is just a little too much of a green in it. I want to keep it more of the blue, because you got to also think when you take it off here, whatever white you see here becomes transparency because of the film, and then that's what you're going to see in the eye. So if you have any kind of like colored eyes, that's going to seep through there too as well. So the way I work this now is I'm going to do this off camera because I can't do this close. I got to get in there and make sure I'm doing it right, and I'll never get the camera in there. So what I'm going to do is I got a nice fresh X-Acto blade. I'll cut out my little pieces of the eye. I'll dip it in water. I let it sit for like 10 minutes, and then what I do is I slide it onto the statue. And then once I get it to where I need it to get it, I kind of let it dry a little bit. Just let it set up, because sometimes the water will not let the decal kind of go around the eyeball like that. So what you got to do is use Solvaset, and Solvaset helps kind of like, it's a decaling setting solution. So once the eye is there and I get it to where I want it, what I'll do is I get a nice fine tip paintbrush and slowly just kind of put some drops on there. Not heavy drops, because this stuff seems to... I've seen some people use this for their decals and it works out perfectly fine, but me, I have some trouble sometimes where this might melt it or grab it or pull it. So I kind of just work it out. So I got to go back and forth and do this off camera. Because sometimes I'll do an eye here and it looks perfect and amazing, and then when I go do the other one, it just gets ripped and torn and I got to do it over again. So sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. I'm always still learning and practicing, because it just, you know, that's why it's just easier for me to use these compared to trying to paint it, and then all of a sudden I realize one's big, one's small, and I got to try to fix it up again. So we're going to go with these. So I'll get these cut up. We'll get this on her statue. Once she's all set up, we'll come back. We'll show you how she looks on the base. And then off camera, what I'll do is I'll install the cape, and then we'll come back with a final video in the photo studio of her all finished up. Okay, so we are pretty much done. I put the eyes in, as you can see. I'm just going to let them sort of dry up a little bit before I seal them with the Tamiya Clear. I don't like to kind of mess with them until they're really dry, just in case. So other than that, everything is pretty much said and done. I went over her, looked everything up. If there's any other stuff I need to do, I'll do some touch-ups. So all I really need to do now is install the cape. So I'm going to let the figure dry up. I'm going to let the base dry up too, because I just did the base earlier this morning. Let that cure up. And hopefully tomorrow I can get the cape installed. And once the cape's done, we'll come back with a final video so you guys can see it in the photo studio a little bit better than all this stuff in the background. So thanks for watching the series. Hopefully you guys like the way she came out. She will probably end up for grabs on my website, because I'm going to be using this to maybe get a better camera for 2019, so we can at least get some more detailing and stuff going on with the videos. So thanks for watching, and we will be back with some more videos.